I've been doing this for quite a while now, and it kind of gets to a point where you have to have an existential crisis. And when I say doing this, I mean both the channel and the Books and Bow blog. The great comedian Stuart Lee once said, "I want to keep doing this forever and then die." I think about that constantly, finding a thing that you love and just doing it. Doing it better, doing it more, and then eventually things come to an end. And the thing I love most in this world, which won't come as a surprise to anyone, is stories. I love fiction and I love books. And all I really want out of my life is to be involved in stories. I recently wrote a book. It's a horrible little collection of queer horror stories. And I'm really proud of it. It's out there in the world now, you can buy it, there's a link in the description. Ever since I left university, when I was 21, 22, all I've wanted to do is write stories of my own. And I think that's a dream of countless people. Instead, I ended up as an English teacher, teaching literature to kids. I didn't like it, I eventually left, and now I do this. I realized recently, as I said in my video about my book, that I could just put my book out there in the world, that I could write stories and people would buy and read them. That's really cool, and I'd like to keep doing it. So I have a plan. There's a kind of rule of thumb when it comes to YouTube that you might not have heard of, that once you reach 100,000 subscribers, the money you make off your channel is enough to sustain you as a full-time job. I'm here to tell you right now that that's an absolute lie. I've been running a blog for like 6 years. I know a lot about SEO. That is horseshit. And the reason it's horseshit is that it doesn't just depend on how many subs you have, but also what kind of a niche you have. YouTubers with small channels in terms of subscribers can make a surprising amount of money if they're in the right niche, because advertisers target certain niches. I'm not going to bore you with that. The point is, I make next to nothing off this channel. What sustains me is my Patreon. Between the blog, the channel, and my Patreon, I'm able to stay alive. Thank you, patrons. A few months ago, I put out a video asking for more support on Patreon. That's not really what this is, I guess. What this is me taking everything I've said so far and pulling it into a future. My Patreon, like every Patreon, is separated into a bunch of different tiers, and depending on which tier you choose, you get certain benefits. And I had a thought recently. Well, actually, that's a lie. I stole a thought. This is Welcome to Dawley Hall by Alison Greaves. It's a novel that was originally published on Patreon, chapter by chapter. Alison Greaves set up a Patreon where people could pay monthly to get access to her novel as it was being written. And then eventually she self-published it through Amazon, like I did with mine, and it's gotten picked up by an indie press. Good for her. I'm going to talk about this book in a future video, by the way, in case you're interested. And that made me realize there's so much more that you can do with Patreon. So I'm going to. Right now, my $1 patrons get access to a Discord server that I'm in all day, every day. I basically use it as my social media. It's a great place for bookworms to hang out, and that's what they get. $3, $5, $10, $15, they all get you access to more things. But I'm switching it up. I'm doing more. I'm adding more to all of these tiers. And to make it interesting, I'm combining my YouTube work with my writing. I want to make this channel bigger, I want to make it better. I'm going to talk about a few changes to the channel in a second, but I also want to keep writing stories. I'm good at it. So, from now on, my $1 patrons also get access to essays that I am going to write and publish exclusively on Patreon. Those essays are going to be about fiction, both from the point of a reader and of a writer. I have a lot of thoughts and ideas that I want to share, and I want to write them down in intimate essays, and I'm going to put those out on Patreon. So if you're interested in my attitude and my perspective on the craft of writing, again, both as a reader and a writer, I'm going to be putting out weekly essays on my Patreon, and you can read them for as little as $1 a month. And from now on, people who are on the $3 and up tiers also get constant previews of what I'm working on. Right now, $3 and up patrons get previews of what videos I'm putting out, but I'm also going to give previews of my writing. I write a lot of poetry, and my poetry is getting published in lots of places. It's very exciting. And every poem I write, as soon as it's done, as soon as it's edited, as soon as I'm happy with it, I'm going to publish it on Patreon before I publish it anywhere else for my patrons to enjoy if they're on the $3 and up tiers. That also includes any short stories that I write, and again, those patrons also get access to these essays I mentioned. But I'm also working on a big, epic fantasy novel. In fact, it's the first of a trilogy. I've always enjoyed fantasy, I grew up on it, and about 8 years ago I was living in Shanghai and I plotted and wrote a fantasy novel. I then threw out the draft, it wasn't good enough. In early 2020, I started again. I got about halfway through a really good solid draft before the pandemic hit and I lost my mojo, didn't want to write anymore, gave it up. But that book has never ever left me. I love it. I am bonded with that protagonist and I'm gonna finish that novel. So if you join my Patreon on the $5 and up tiers, you will be able to read every single chapter as I write it. Right now on my Patreon, there is a sneak preview of chapter 1, the first few pages. I'm gonna publish the whole of chapter 1 this week, next week chapter 2, etc. So if you read my book and you liked it, or if you're just interested in what kind of things I write, and if you're a fantasy fan especially, follow me as I rewrite and edit and work on this really good fantasy novel and put it out week by week, chapter by chapter on my Patreon. The idea of being able to put my book out serialized for people to read is so cool. And it feels kind of Victorian because so many Victorian novels were serialized in magazines that people would pay for and subscribe to, etc., etc. It's a cool way to do it. It's a subscription service to my fiction. But nothing within this channel is being sacrificed. Every single benefit my patrons currently have in terms of YouTube videos, they're still getting. Nothing is changing. I'm just trying to put more into my Patreon. I'd like my Patreon to grow more so that I'm not constantly afraid of running out of money. This is currently my job and I want to keep it that way, but I want to offer more. I want everyone to have their cake and eat it. If you're a patron of mine or you're thinking of becoming one, I want to make sure you are getting as much as I can possibly give. I'm offering everything I have, specifically to my Patreon community. And I know there are a lot of people who support me on Patreon who don't care about the perks and bonuses. They just want to support me making good YouTube videos. And for that reason, the channel is continuing and I want to make it a little bit better. You might not have noticed, but recently I increased my video output to 4 videos a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. And this has actually hampered the algorithm. My videos are getting fewer views. The amount of new subscribers I get has slowed down. It's like YouTube doesn't like me putting out so many videos and I can feel myself approaching burnout as well. It's just too much. It's not too much physical work, too much labor, I can handle that. It's too much for my brain. I'm not creative enough to think of 4 videos a week, and I can't read enough books to put out 4 videos a week. So I'm going back to 3. My videos will now go out on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. No weekends. I take weekends off anyway because my partner works 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, so videos won't go up on the weekend anymore. So I'm still putting out 3 videos a week, which is still a lot. And I want those videos to be of a slightly better quality in terms of their subject matter specifically. I want every video to be educational, to have some context and history, or maybe just to be a list where you're getting more recommendations and more insights per video. This means I'm going to do fewer videos that are just on one specific book, unless I receive a review copy, and even then I might find a way to incorporate the review copy into a list so that again you're getting more bang for your buck. If I review a horror novel, I will do a horror book list with that novel in it. That way you get more. And I'll still do single book videos if maybe it's a classic where I can do a huge essay length video on it and really dig deep into the book, its history, its context, its author, etc., etc. I did a video recently about vampires. It's 50 minutes long and it's the whole legacy of vampire fiction. It took ages to write and research and blah blah blah. It didn't get that many views and I think that's because it got buried in all the fucking stuff I put out. If I put out 4 videos a week and that's one of them, it's easy to just not notice it or never know it existed. If I put out 3, maybe each one will get a little bit more time in the sun, a bit more spotlight. I don't know. Let's find out. So my plan right now is to reduce my videos from 4 to 3, to have time to write fiction, and to make sure that every single thing I ever do gets put out onto my Patreon, because it's my patrons who matter the most. I get some money from YouTube. I get some money from blogging. I get 75% of my money from Patreon. And all those three things combined make up enough to live. There are YouTube creators out there who get tens of thousands of dollars a month off Patreon, and I don't know what they need that money for. I'm a socialist. I don't want a lot of money. I just want to be able to live and survive while making the things I make, while writing essays, putting out videos, teaching people things, and making fiction and writing poetry and putting all of that out there for you to read. I love stories. I want to keep making videos about other people's stories, and I want to make stories and poetry of my own, but I live in a capitalism, so if you can support me, I'm making sure that you get as much as I can possibly put out, as much of my writing and as much of my video output. I don't want to be a content creator. I want to be an educator and an artist. I want to make art that you can enjoy, and I want to make videos that teach you things or inspire you in some way. For that reason, I'd also like to put a little bit more effort into videos about the transgender experience. I am trans, I love being trans, and I want to put out positive videos and informative videos about being trans. The world is a horrible, scary place right now, especially for trans people. And instead of complaining about these awful draconian laws, I'm going to spread trans joy, so look forward to a few deep and lengthy videos about being trans in the future. That's just an extra bonus for anyone who cares, but from now on, I want to make sure that each of my videos means something to me, to you. I don't want to just throw out a video because I need to make one. Oh, I just read this book, I'll talk about it. No, every video needs to mean something. I want to be an educator and an artist. And if you can support me on Patreon in doing all of that, I would really, really appreciate it. Getting funding and support as an artist, as a creator, is really hard. If you love my channel, if you enjoyed my book, if you're curious about what I put out, please consider supporting me. This is all I want out of my life, like Stuart Lee said. I want to create good educational videos, and I want to create good art, and I want to share it with you. So if you can support me, well, thank you. I'm gonna start crying, and you don't need that. The link to my Patreon is in the description, obviously, as is the link to my book, and I'll leave it there. Subscribe for books.